Welcome to the Canadian Expat, where we continue on our journey speaking with Canadians and Canadian organizations abroad so that we might gain a bit of inspiration, obtain some advice, and perhaps hear a few cautionary tales. Today, we go to Italy. The boot-shaped peninsula jutting into the Mediterranean is just slightly larger than Newfoundland and Labrador. But in the course of its 3,000 plus years of understood history, Italy has generated a significant portion of Western history, arts, culture, and thought. Italy is responsible for being the cradle of the Roman Empire. It was the birthplace of Michelangelo and Dante, and is home to the head of the largest religious organization on the face of the earth, the Catholic Church, with just about 1.3 billion people. Italy is also home to a significant community of Canadians that live and work in this beautiful country of just under 61 million people. Helping to support the over $12 billion in bilateral trade activity between Canada and Italy is the Canadian Chamber of Commerce located in Rome. My next guest is Jose Salgado, the current president of the Chamber, and Jose is an entrepreneur and business owner. He began his term at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in September of 2018. Jose, welcome to the Canadian Expat.
Thank you very much, Alan. Hi to everybody.
Thanks. Jose, can you tell us a little bit about the history of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Italy?
Absolutely. I've been living here in Rome for the past 5 years. And before moving to Canada, 10 years before that, I was living in Mexico City, where I was born. And I had the chance to work at the Canadian Chamber in Mexico, which is one of probably the third largest in the world. Very important because the proximity. Mexico is a big commercial partner of Canada. So I learned a lot about the implications of a chamber, the services they offer. And when I moved here, I realized that for the past 20-something years, there was no independent Canadian business representation. So it took me a while to put it together. And just last year, as you mentioned, September 2018, we became an official nonprofit organization called the Canadian Chamber in Italy. And this is something interesting. I got rid of the word commerce for a specific reason. Because I realized after looking at the models of other chambers, not just the Canadians, but other international chambers in Italy, I realized that the market and the culture here is very different than many other places. So a chamber is not only a group of business, but also is very cultural. The way of doing business in Italy, and I'm pretty sure we'll get into that later in more depth, is it has to do a lot with social relationships and how the social life. So I got rid of the word commerce because it's really deeply rooted in the culture, the way of doing business through a social way. And that seems to be also give us much more time to become a more dynamic chamber. I will call it a chamber 2.0.
So it's only been a year since the chamber has been in existence.
Very recent. And the idea is basically trying to find a niche. Instead of copying what other chambers are doing, trying to create one that adapts to the 21st century. Because that's the other thing I noticed, that many chambers, the ones that are already established 20 or 50 years ago, they have a system that was adapted to that time. But when I speak to companies nowadays, especially those in the fields that we cover, are much more dynamic, more innovative. Their business model is different. So I decided that we cannot talk about innovation. We cannot promote innovation without having a flexible and a dynamic system. So yes, it's been only 1 year, and we're really focused on innovation. That's our main area of interest at this point.
So at this point, and still recognizing that the chamber is essentially still in kind of an infancy, really, How is membership? Are you finding strength in the market, and what sort of industries are represented there?
Well, that's it. When I call it a chamber 2.0, what I mean is taking the good parts of a traditional chamber of commerce and adapt it to something I call, well, many people already call it like a B Lab, which like benefit like B Corp, but for nonprofits, B Lab. So put it together, do a little mix, shake it. Which again, as you said, it's still a baby, so we don't know how it's gonna evolve. But so when it comes to membership, I decided to create a new system where we have sponsors instead of members for different reasons. And one of the main reasons is that companies nowadays are looking for very specific projects. So they don't want to be a member for like the duration of a year because the return of investment sometimes is not very clear. But they want to sponsor an event, they want to sponsor a specific forum, a summit, etc. So that way, it's easier for us to create very fragmented projects that at the end have a bigger picture. So right now, as I said, we have no members. We are not a member-based association. We only have sponsors, so and supporters. We are trying to create also a network of partnerships, which is very interesting because those are people already established company associations, sorry, and organizations here in Italy and in Canada with a proven trajectory. And what we're trying to do is to create this strong partnership. So it helps us validate what we're doing, but it helps us also to improve our network. So whenever we have a Canadian company or an Italian company in a specific sector, is not just our network, but it's the network of our partners. So I'm very happy to announce that, especially in the space sector, we have already partnered with the former president of the Italian Space Agency, which is now the president of the Fondazione Amaldi, which is an important association here. And he's creating the first Space Economy Expo Forum in December. It has never happened before in Europe, a forum just for the space economy. And we are a marketing partner. Canadian Chamber is a marketing partner for this event. But also, we have created an interesting partnership with the Bocconi University, which is the biggest university in Milan, the business university in Milan. They're about to create actually the biggest and greenest and most sustainable campus in the whole Europe. So they're really thinking forward. And we have a partnership with them for the Space Economy Evolution Laboratory. So as you can see, the just been existing for a year, not even. Those are really very strong steps we're taking to make sure that whenever we have a Canadian company interested in Italy, we can offer them a wide range of opportunities. So partnerships along with sponsorships are the two main areas that we are putting forward to bring this, again, Chamber 2.0. I really like this name, Chamber 2.0. To create a bigger and more dynamic exchange of communication between our whole ecosystem.
So I'll be referring you to Chamber 2.0 from this point forward.
I'll agree with that.
Congratulations on this innovation. This is fantastic. So I'm wondering about if there are any Canadians that maybe are involved in business in Italy right now, or perhaps they're maybe thinking about a business in Canada that they'd like to introduce to Italy. It sounds like it's a different model than what we've seen in other places, which is, I think it's a fantastic idea. But are there events that they might be able to become involved in? Maybe networking events that maybe they could volunteer with? What sort of activities can a Canadian that's currently living in Italy work with you on?
Absolutely. Well, let's start by saying that there are 4 areas of interest that we have actually locked down, and they all had to do with the future: space, ICT, and below that we can talk about machine learning, artificial intelligence, and a wide range of other ICT, IoT, big data, etc. All the trending names that you can imagine are under that umbrella. We're talking about the green economy, which is has to do with clean technology, but also involves a lot of projects. Having here 3 United Nation based organizations like FAO IFAT and WFP. Also, agri-food is very important because we're talking about, again, not the traditional import and export of food and agri-food products, but we're talking about innovation, a lot of technology transfer in that area. And so those four areas, space, clean technology or green economy, agri-food, and ICT, are the main areas that we have noticed that Italy is taking the lead, at least in the space sector. Right now, they're the number 3 in Europe, but very soon we can see right now they're taking very strong step forward to become the number 1. Just to give you an idea, and this answers a little bit the question, space sector right now in Italy is extremely profitable. It's open to a lot of innovation and investment. And if you want to send any kind of object into orbit, you have to use an Italian rocket by Avio. So imagine they launched from the French Guiana. It's sold by a French company, but the technology is almost 100% Italian. So few people know that. So that's how important they are. You can talk about satellites, you can talk about downstream, upstream communication, but if you want to get anything up there, has to go in Europe, has to go through the Italian rocket.
Sounds like the Canadian Chamber 2.0 is really on the forefront of this technology, which is amazing.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, the idea is because when I look around, there's already a lot of associations, and not here in Italy, but in general in Europe, talking about the traditional exchange. And I think that's fine, but I'm realizing that innovation is really a niche. So what we're trying to do, because we're new, is trying to look into the needs of these new technologies so we can adapt it. Because right now the reality is that when I talk to other chambers and when I talk to other business representations or commercial representations, they don't know about this. They heard about a little bit artificial intelligence, for example, but they don't know what are the implications, what are the opportunities, because it's still kind of not mainstream. Although it's already getting there, still not mainstream. So we're taking advantage of that. And what is interesting here is that artificial intelligence, Canada, it has the Montreal and Toronto has one, the biggest amount of startups, and the other one, the biggest amount of students, which the whole world is needing. And right now there's a lack of engineers here in Italy. So there's a lot of opportunity for Canadian engineers to come here and start a project. One of the benefits in Italy for artificial intelligence specifically is that the skilled labor is very cheap compared to other parts of Europe. So you get a decent amount of skill versus the investment. We start to see a lot of angel investors, and sorry, I'm going a little bit off topic now, but I think artificial intelligence is something that is of interest to everybody at this point, because the beauty of it is that it can be applied to pretty much any sector. When we think about AI, we think, someone at the fashion industry said, well, that doesn't apply to me. Well, that's a mistake. AI, artificial intelligence, is the process of large amount of data that can be used to pretty much everything. And I can tell you that because I've seen it used to areas that you could not think it was an organic way, like fashion, for example. So I think this is something that every single company needs to get on at this point to understand what it means and how can they apply it. We have here in Italy, for example, a very interesting program where companies can get a proof of concept for any kind of project for only 20,000 euros. And this association is a school, actually. They bring the best talent in the world. So the students actually don't pay anything. They get paid for their stay for 2 months, and they have to work on a project sponsored by a company in the automotive sector, in the pharma sector, any sector really. And after 2 months, they get a proof of concept, prototype, and they decide whether they want to move forward. When we put this in a large scale, 20,000 euros for a prototype of artificial intelligence, it's very low investment. So this is something where Canada, for example, can bring, because if you try to do this in Canada, we're talking about 40,000 euros, even more. So this model, as the one I'm telling you, doesn't exist everywhere. And Rome and Italy is a good place, for example, for Canadian companies to come to have a little bit of research and develop, and then apply the technology back home. So those are some of the opportunities that come to mind.
For those Canadians, and I know that you touched a little bit on this earlier, but a Canadian that is thinking about doing business, or a Canadian company that wants to do business in Italy, what would you tag as the three top most important things to get involved in?
Well, the sad reality, or the good reality, depends your point of view, is that most of the Canadian companies operating in Italy hire local managers, and all the big names of you can imagine are operated by Italian talent. So I have not seen, to be honest, in these 5 years, a single Canadian company run and operated by Canadians. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of uncertainty. And that's the reason why, when you were mentioning about all the 12 millions of trade, I don't remember the exact figure right now because they keep changing every year. The trade goes only one third, and sometimes even below that, from Italy to Canada. So it's mainly Italy benefiting from all this exchange. All the food products, all the technology. They manufacture a lot of pieces here that go to Canada. So we are not in a very good position at this moment. And with the CETA agreement, we call that in English the Comprehensive Transatlantic Agreement, the possibilities now for Italy specifically are much more bigger. So I have not seen Canadian companies with Canadians leading them. So what I would suggest for somebody interested in coming to Italy to start their own business in pretty much any area is to get together. And that's why this chamber is here. When we're talking about all these, I was telling you about all these partnership we have with the space companies. We are trying to get as a marketing partner, we understand that the presence of a Canadian company in an international exhibition in Europe is expensive. It's far to travel, it's expensive to come. So what we push for is to bring at least 5 to 10 companies in the space sector on their one Canada booth. So that's what I will suggest for Canadian companies and people interested here, is that you need to come and gather other Canadian players to work together. Collaboration in a country like Italy is extremely important. It's very, very hard to do things by yourself. It's not like other countries that you can be a professional and just get your studio and your legal firm right up. Yeah, here is very hard. So that would be my first suggestion. There are some very interesting opportunities, but have to be done removing a little bit like the Canadian way. We have to come here, start small, and get together with other players in your sector.
Great advice. So, goals for the chamber. What does your future look like?
Well, as of next month, we are going to start to create a stronger partnerships. We are talking about other universities in Italy and in Canada, associations in these 4 areas of interest. One that is coming soon, and we're still in the making, is with the Food and Agriculture Organization, which is like the United Nations based agency that is going to bring us a lot of opportunities for innovation in that area. We want to propose these agencies, WFP, IFAD, and FAO, the creation of a 52 satellites, a constellation of satellites that can help them with a read of the actual state of fisheries, forestry, climate migration, etc., all in real time. So we have already done some work around that. We're WFP, the World Food Program, might take the lead on this. We're still looking at, these are projects like very big that take time. But that's how I feel Canada can help to facilitate these conversations, because this will mean, if this happens, all these United Nations-based agencies can have real information, right information, real time. Because right now what happens is that whenever they want to track something, they have to use somebody else's satellite. And that's very expensive. It's not always reliable. You don't get the information right away. And because the Internet of Things, we're getting much more connected, especially in places like Africa. What an African farmer needs is information about the crop now, not what's going to happen in, what happened already a week ago. They need it now. So SMS, for example, is a great way to communicate with them. Most of the farmers in areas, remote areas, have at least access to a SMS phone, and that's how they get their information. But it's very hard right now. So we would like to propose a Canadian initiative for all these United Nations agencies to create a constellation that can benefit the whole world. And of course, in the meantime, there's a lot of opportunities to bring Canadian technology, because robotics for space is one of our main exports right now. We don't have a launching pad. We don't have a lot of things in Canada. But when it comes to robotics, the Canada arm that is used already in the International Space Station, and the Canada Arm 2, which is going to be used in the lunar space station that the US is building. They're already pledged to create that one. So Canada has a lot of experience there. And that's already a big one, and I feel that's our mission as Chamber 2.0 is not just to look into Italy and Canada, but start to have a much more international approach, because in this connected world, we need to exercise a collaboration that goes beyond the borders. So I like to think that when I say Italy, Canadian Chamber in Italy, I'm also including Europe. And so we're starting also to look a lot into what's happening in Europe. So eventually can create, in maybe a few years, with the help of other chambers, a European chamber, in a Canadian European chamber. So we have a better and stronger presence in the whole region.
Jose, good luck in all of this. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate the time.
And thank you to everyone watching. We appreciate you watching. If you've liked this video, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. And if you've enjoyed this and would like to participate in one of these conversations, please comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.